and make appropriate announcements before leaving the air. Now, let's take your family or mine, for example. Let's take my wife, Helen. She happens to be sitting in the kitchen when the due-line report reaches NORAD and CONELRAD goes into effect. She's listening to music as she fixes our daughter's lunch.
We interrupt our normal program to cooperate in security and defense measures as requested by the United States government. We interrupt our
My wife is familiar with the public action signals with civil defense. She recognizes that the siren is blasting the alert signal. She tunes the radio to 1240 and waits for the voice of CONELRAD to come on. While she waits, Helen gets the food hamper and the extra blankets and clothing she's readied against this day. Our young daughter, Betsy, home for a lunch hour, comes through the garden gate as the sirens blast. Helen sends up a silent prayer of thanks. A couple of minutes later, CONELRAD goes on the air.
This is CONELRAD. Here is a special bulletin to all residents of this area. The sirens you hear are sounding the alert signal. Hostile aircraft has been sighted over the Arctic and is heading toward this country. Civil defense authorities may order evacuation of this area within the next few minutes. Stay tuned to this station. Do not panic. Do not use your telephone. Follow instructions laid out by your local officials. Keep listening to this station for information.
Helen feeds our daughter as she waits for the next bulletin. Her car has been readied over the months against this day. Gas tank filled, parts checked. Her food supplies packed in a hamper are already in the car. She fills jugs with fresh water, gathers raincoats, rubbers, and extra blankets as she waits. The voice comes on again.
This is CONELRAD. This is James Riley, Civil Defense Coordinator for Morgantown. Several enemy bombers sighted over the Arctic have already been intercepted by our Air Force and destroyed. A few have pierced the dew line and may be heading this way. Civil defense is now sounding the alert signal, which means we are to evacuate the city. Follow the instructions and plans you have rehearsed. We repeat, this is CONELRAD. Evacuation of the city is underway. All residents of Morgantown follow evacuation instructions. There is plenty of time. Work quickly but efficiently. Pick up your neighbors if any have been assigned to ride with you. Go to your evacuation center if you do not have a car. Route 472 and 148 are open and cleared of traffic to facilitate evacuation north. This is CONELRAD. Civil Defense has ordered an evacuation of Morgantown.
Helen and Betsy pick up our next-door neighbor and her baby and head out of town. Morgantown is a prime target area. The women are frightened, sick at heart, normal reactions. But the car radio is on the CONELRAD station. And because of the Civil Defense National Warning System, they've over 2 hours of precious time between them and the enemy bombers. Time in which to get to safety for themselves and the children.
This is your CONELRAD station. This is James Riley, Civil Defense Coordinator for Morgantown. Traffic on Highway 7 has become heavy. All cars evacuating north, now near the Landover Turnpike, use alternate Route B. Switch to US 124, which is clear and moving rapidly. Traffic on Highway 7 has become heavy.
Morgantown is bombed. It is a near miss. Some property is destroyed. The people are safely evacuated. The enemy is wiped from the skies. But Morgantown is still not habitable.
Because of the heavy amount of radioactive fallout, residents of Morgantown are warned not to return home. Please stay at your relocation point until you're advised by radiological monitor over this CONELRAD station that it is safe for you to return. Fallout over Highway 7 is still heavy. Do not risk your life or the lives of those with you. Stay tuned to your CONELRAD station. You will receive bulletins at frequent intervals. This is Frank Elias, Radiological Monitoring Chief, Civil Defense, Morgantown.
This was CONELRAD. This was how it functioned. This was how it was geared to give the civil defense instructions and information that could mean the difference between life and death for the American people if an enemy should ever strike. I wound up my meeting with Fred Alberts. I left Colorado Springs and NORAD and headed for Washington and the FCC. I wanted more information on CONELRAD procedure in peacetime. And the man who knew the most about it was Leonard Stillman, an official of the Federal Communications Commission. He started to sketch me in. Enemy attack from the sky in this atomic age is a pretty dreadful thought, Dan. But you've been active in civil defense. You know how bad natural disaster can be.
Yes, Leonard, I know. Fire, flood, volcano, hurricane. I've been through them all. And when your life, your family, and everything you've got is threatened, well, no one stops to think what the cause is. A tornado that kills your child is just as devastating as the latest nuclear warhead.
Exactly. And with CONELRAD set up for use in case of enemy attack, well, it occurred to the Weather Bureau that the same attention signal could be used for natural disaster, too. And the order was adopted at the end of 1957.
Which means?
That the FCC is enabling all broadcasting stations, AM, FM, and TV, during licensed hours, to use the CONELRAD attention signals on their regular frequencies, preparatory to the broadcast of Weather Bureau emergency warnings.
You mean there'll be no switchover to 640 or 1240 kilocycles? No broadcast equipment changes?
None at all. In addition to regular Weather Bureau network, the attack warning system can be used for fast, widespread dissemination of severe weather warnings issued by the U.S. Weather Bureau. It can be used for tornadoes, storms, damaging winds, flash floods, and hurricanes.
And once the warnings are broadcast?
At the moment of broadcast, city government agencies and the press will all be automatically informed. Civil defense can then take immediate action for help to the threatened areas.
And the direct civil defense tie-in?
Well, that's already been taken care of. The Weather Bureau has designated the meteorologist in charge of one station in every state to serve as state civil defense liaison representative. His job, to assist in resolving weather warning problems. Now, here's a list of the U.S. Weather Bureau stations and the meteorologists in charge. All warnings for a given area will always be limited to the wording of the originating Weather Bureau office.
That's to eliminate the possibility of conflicting warnings, of course.
Yes. Now, all weather warnings are a Weather Bureau effort. Look, let's take a case in point. Suppose there's been bad weather off the Atlantic. Suppose a hurricane's built up at sea and suddenly changed its track. It's intensifying by the minute. In Washington, D.C., weathermen stood ready to advise the use of CONELRAD for the preservation of life and property in the area they serviced. Intensifying hurricanes, impending thunderstorms which could be tracked on radar, winds endangering life and property, snowstorms. These were some of the enemies CONELRAD was geared to fight. Then suddenly the warning and advice to use CONELRAD was issued by the Washington, D.C. office. The men waiting at local Weather Bureau offices in threatened states moved rapidly to put the CONELRAD service into operation by use of their local teletypewriter circuits.
This severe weather warning requires CONELRAD alerting procedures.
And the CONELRAD attention signal went into effect. There were two approved methods of procedure at Weather Bureau stations. Key radio stations in the CONELRAD system could be notified either by phone or by local Weather Bureau teletype. In New York City, the special teletype was used. The three bells, rung 3 times, alerted New York's 4 key stations: WOR, WCBS, WRCA, and WABC. In addition, it activated teletypes at the news services, special agencies of city government, and state and city civil defense. Radios in and around the area serviced by the U.S. Weather Bureau in New York City responded within minutes.
We interrupt this program to bring you an emergency weather warning from the U.S. Weather Bureau. This bulletin was issued at 4 p.m. May 14th for New Jersey, County of Cape May, Atlantic, Burlington, Monmouth, and Ocean counties. Hurricane Zeta has changed course and now threatens the New Jersey coast. Safety precautions should be started now. Storm tides will, in the course of storm, flood coastal lands to heights of 12 feet above normal tides. Destructive winds and high tides will begin at 2 a.m. May 15th, or shortly thereafter. People within reach of this exceptionally high storm tides should evacuate immediately before rising waters cut off escape. This is an emergency weather warning for New Jersey, County of Cape May, Atlantic, Burlington, Monmouth, and Ocean counties, issued by the U.S. Weather Bureau, 4 p.m., May 14th. Further warnings will be broadcast at frequent intervals.
No changeover to other frequencies is necessary for the CONELRAD alert. In New York City, the 4 key CONELRAD stations are constantly monitored by smaller stations. Within seconds, they too broadcast the warnings verbatim as issued by the Weather Bureau. State warning systems spread the alert quickly. At Civil Defense Headquarters in New Jersey and New York, officials made swift plans.
Here you are, Joe. CONELRAD alerting teletype message. United States Weather Bureau just went out over the air.
Yeah, this is going to take a lot of doing. Flood and high tides in the early hours of the morning. It'll have to be a house-to-house check right away. Radio's not enough. Everyone's got to be contacted personally. This is a job for civil defense.
bulletins were issued by the U.S. Weather Bureau at frequent intervals. Warned by the Weather Bureau, aided by civil defense workers and local agencies of government, the residents of the stricken area were helped immeasurably. Lives were saved, property losses held at a minimum. And this, Dan, is CONELRAD in peacetime. Another arm of defense against disaster. Another weapon against nature on the rampage. Another means of safeguarding people, free people, living in a democracy. That government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
The Federal Convention of 1787 took 4 months to draft our American Constitution, but it was another 3 years before all the arguments were decided and the 13th state voted for the Constitution. During the heated debates, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay wrote very strong arguments in favor of it in a series of essays called the Federalist Papers. Finally, it was up to the state legislatures to decide the issue. And to show the strong feelings of the times, only 3 voted for it unanimously. The Constitution barely passed in the state of New York, where the vote was 30 to 28. Rhode Island was the last to vote in favor of it, but there it had only the slim majority of 34 to 32. By only a few votes did we have a nation consisting of 13 states. Yes, Hamilton, Madison, and Jay won their debates, and they did so not only for themselves, but for the future. We today are that future.
By the People is produced and directed by Chick Vincent. The script was written by Judith S. Bublick. This is Lon Clark as Dan Taylor. Heard with me in the cast were Brett Morrison, Mason Adams, and Louis Van Ruten.
Armed Forces Radio, but they did. There it is from 1959, By the People, here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Up next, we'll have what actually aired over the radio in 1961 when you heard the CONELRAD.
Do you know what it takes to be iconic? You are iconic. I am iconic. I love Iconic Agua. I drink Iconic Agua every day. Join the movement. Hydrate with Iconic Agua. Find Iconic Agua in all Kroger and Ralph stores across America. Because when you're thirsty, there's only one way to hydrate. And that's with the world's best tasting spring water on earth. Hydrate responsibly. Iconic Agua, where hydration meets greatness.